Hello everyone, it's Laffy Traffy. Happy Halloween and welcome to my discussion about awakenings. We're both dressed up for the festivities and this is a sneak preview to my actual Halloween costume that if you don't follow me on Twitter, go follow me over there so you'll be able to see it. And we'll be dressing up. It's a One Piece character. This video will contain spoilers for 1030 of One Piece, so if you haven't read that, make sure you go read that because it was amazing. I'll give you one hint. Alright, that's enough. With the recent chapter, still, I have never been more proud to be a Law stan, you know, like, I don't know if I've ever shown my tattoo on actual YouTube before, but this is my pride right there. So I know I've shown it on Twitch, so shout out to everyone who's seen that before, but Law was the highlight of this recent chapter, and the big reveal here is that we get Kid and Law's awakening. So we're going to talk about awakenings in general, who we've seen them from, and what Kid and Law's are, and possibly end with a prediction of what Luffy's could be. If you're new to the channel, or if you've seen some of my other videos and have not subscribed yet, feel free to subscribe. We're on our way to 1,000 subscribers. We're on our way to 1,000 subscribers, slowly getting there. It would mean a lot if you subscribed and liked the video because that helps out a lot also. We're here to talk about awakenings, so let's get into it. So first I want to talk about awakenings in general, because awakenings for the three different types of devil fruits are very different. We have Logias, Zones, and Paramecias. For Logias, we've seen people like Aokiji and Akainu where it hasn't outright been stated, but we can pretty much infer that awakening affects the environment around them, because Punk Hazard, their battleground, half of it was covered in ice and it was constantly snowing, so the terrain and the weather are both affected, and Akainu's side was lava, molten, you know, magma, and it was super hot and dry. So we could assume there that Logias affect the weather and the terrain. And I also want to throw out the argument that Crocodile was also awakened because he was able to draw the moisture out of the surrounding area. So that definitely kind of hinted towards an awakening, and I don't know if it was really thought out that much back in Alabasta, but, you know, I'd argue that he was awakened. Now, awakenings for Zone, the only confirmed zones that we know to be awakened are the beasts in Impel Down. And it was said that they are super durable, they become bigger in size, and they have extreme regenerative abilities. So that's what we've seen from Zones. So any Zone user, that's what their awakening is probably going to be like, because there was multiple different types of Zone users there, and they all had the same effect. So it's safe to say that all Zones are awakened that way. And we can also argue that Chopper's Monster Point is a type of early awakening that he wasn't able to control, and now he can control for a little bit longer period of time as he grows stronger and stronger. So I would definitely argue that Chopper's Monster Point is a form, if not awakening in itself. So that's really exciting for Chopper too. But then we get to Paramecias, and we have two major confirmed awakened Paramecia users, Doflamingo and Katakuri. Two of my favorite villains, let me say. Antagonists. Katakuri's a bro, you know. Doflamingo was able to use his string abilities to affect the surrounding environment and turn that itself into string, and then we had Katakuri, Mochi, who turned the environment and everything into mochi. So it's safe to say that Paramecias that produce or control a substance, like Doflamingo and Katakuri, can kind of turn the surrounding environments into that element or something kind of similar to Logias, but not quite. I wanted to throw something out there that I was thinking about that maybe some of you are gonna be like, well duh, but I, myself, have never heard of anyone talk about the specifics of it. Whitebeard. So, if you ask anyone who knows anything about One Piece if Whitebeard had awakened his fruit, the obvious answer would be yes. But not many people have ever really talked about what in the story points towards that, because back in Marineford, there were some instances of advanced hockey and Conqueror's hockey, but there wasn't much plot developed about awakenings then. However, you know, it's Whitebeard, and Oda knew that awakenings were gonna be a thing eventually, so I'd argue that we have seen Whitebeard's Awakening already. So in order for this to make sense, I think that we'd have to look at what Whitebeard's basic abilities can do. And I think that it's specifically anything he touches sends out shockwaves immediately from his fists or any other part of his body, his feet, anything. But I would say that the Quake fruit really only emanates from your fists or your body itself. So anything that you touch, the air, the ground, can quake in the immediate vicinity. However, we see Whitebeard do much, much more than that. He uses a heaven and earth rend in Marineford, where the giant is about to attack him. He blocks off, throws the giant off his balance, grabs the air, very different from his just quaking. He didn't just, punch the air and it shattered around the giant. No, he pulled down and tore reality. And the resulting effect was everything in Marineford, the ocean, the entire island, was broken apart and tilted and shattered. So that, I think, 100% was our preview before we even knew what we were looking at, Whitebeard's Awakening. And just looking back at those clips, yeah, Whitebeard, of course, was awakened, but to see it, to go back in Marineford and actually be able to see those instances of him being awakened, even one of his first moves when he quaked the ocean floor, it wasn't that he was touching it, it was that he was affecting the surroundings around him, and that was what caused the tsunami, which kind of kick-started the war into action. Whitebeard was 100% using his awakenings back in Marineford, and it's really awesome to go back and watch that, because I think there's definitely a distinction between him punching something or quaking his immediate area, and when he pulls on reality itself and rends the entirety of Marineford upside down and crooked. That was just, I think I just had to mention that because we're talking about awakenings, and Whitebeard doesn't often get talked about when it comes to awakenings. Of course, like I said, many people would say that he was awakened, but to actually see it, to look back at Marineford and see it for ourselves, it's pretty awesome that it was foreshadowed even back then. So now, we talk about our recent chapter, 1030. We get Law and Kid's Awakening, and it still, 3 days later after reading it, it still makes me just giddy, giddy as a fangirl, thinking about the fact that Law completely carried this chapter, was such a central focus and highlight, and to be able to reveal what his awakening was, including Kid. I mean, Kid was not a side character in this whatsoever. He definitely dealt the finishing blow of the chapter, not a Big Mom. Of course, Big Mom's gonna, this isn't the end of the fight. But just to see the two of them finally work together with the teamwork that I have been hoping for. How many chapters now have I been counting down to a Law, Kid, and Big Mom fight? A few. So we get that, and we'll start with Kid because his is more simple and straightforward. Kid's ability is the magnet fruit, and so he himself is a magnet, and he can attract or repel metal. It's pretty simple. He gets weapons away from people, he can create arms, mech suits. It's a really cool ability, simple but really cool, and so his awakening is pretty simple as well. It's just that while he himself can be a magnet, he can also create other things or people to be magnets as well, and pretty strong ones at that. So he assigns Big Mom to be a magnet. So after Law's attack kind of sets her up for that spike, Kid magnetizes Big Mom, and so metal around her gets immediately pulled to her. First it's Napoleon, one of her homies, but then all of the weapons of the Beast Pirates start flying at her, and that's pretty normal. But then, this is where I definitely say that he can control how strong the magnet is as well, because he made a very, very strong magnet as the steel beams in concrete holding up two giant buildings next to Big Mom start bending and are attracted to her. So the buildings collapse, the steel beams come out and slam into her, an extremely powerful attack, and she just collapses into all of this rubble, and we don't see her at the end of this chapter. So I'm sure, like I said, it's not going to be the end of the fight by any means, but this might be how Big Mom is held off until something else happens. I don't know. But his awakening is pretty straightforward. He can make other things magnets as well and control how strong they are. And like Luffy, sometimes the most simple abilities can be the most interesting. And, you know, like rubber, magnetism is self-explanatory, but seeing the interesting ways that it's used is what has me fascinated by kids' abilities. But on the other hand, sometimes the most complex and unclear abilities can draw the most curiosity by its ambiguous nature, because what is Law's awakening? The Ope Ope no Mi already from its introduction was kind of a head turner because we didn't know exactly what was happening. He was creating this room and affecting everything within it, and it wasn't really until Punk Hazard that it was really cleared up what his abilities are, and they're still weird. And so that goes into his awakening as well, where it's very unclear at first read what exactly is happening. But I have a theory. I have a few layers of a theory of what could be happening here. So the first layer is that he's basically making a concentrated room on his sword, or first in his hand, because it's glowing. It's, you know, just imagine Kuma's fruit, for instance. He has the giant bubble, but as he condenses it and makes it stronger and stronger and stronger, it becomes a glowing orb of intense energy. And that's kind of how I see Law's room, Kroom, in his hand when he first starts out, because it doesn't look like the normal room, of course. It's something about it is different. And so then he puts his sword through it, and it coats the sword in a bubble or room-like ability. So that's why I think that his sword now has a room in it in itself. And that kind of tracks with having your abilities affect other things rather than yourself, because like Kid can make other people magnets, Law can make other things have the properties of a room. So with the sword coated in a room, all of the abilities and techniques that can happen with a room around it can happen now with the sword itself without needing a room, which I think is a very, very cool ability and would make sense why it's so stamina depleting, because that's a big, we'll have to see what happens next chapter, because both of them said that that's a lot of stamina depletion with using their awakening, so hopefully they can continue the fight. But having a concentrated room kind of makes sense as to why his room abilities can now affect Big Mom, because before he couldn't shambles her, he couldn't slice her, but now with the help of anesthesia so that she doesn't really feel it, his sword goes right through her like butter. So with that concentrated room, all the abilities that you would be able to use in a normal room, you can use magnified and without having to make a room around the area. So I think that's really interesting and really overpowered that now his sword, which is his main weapon anyway, now has amplified room techniques. One of which would be Counter Shock, which is when he sliced through Big Mom, he used a shockwave ability very similar to Counter Shock, but it was more intense and magnified. And that's why it was so devastating to Big Mom. So then we go on to the second layer of this Kroom analysis here. And I want to know what exactly his attack focused on. Because his normal abilities kind of hurt the insides of people's physical bodies, and that's why it can bypass the kind of outer hardened exterior of the Yonko, like Kaido and Big Mom. But with Kroom, it's different, because first of all, he's able to bypass her exterior defenses in that way, and mainly it was taking a look at the official translation of his attack name, because in the scans it was just called Shockwaves, and although there was a note saying that it was actually the kanji for the German word for will, it wasn't translated that way, so it didn't really connect in my head. But now seeing it Shock Will with an E, which is again the German word for will as in willpower, the wheels start turning. Like, okay, so his ability has something to do with willpower. And we've seen that the outer layer, that exterior coating that I was talking about on Big Mom and Kaido, have a lot to do with willpower in itself, because there was only twice, excluding this chapter, that Kaido and Big Mom have been injured. One, for Kaido, it's when he was approached by the scabbards at the start of the raid, and he had those flashbacks to Odin, the one person who was actually proven to be able to hurt him and pose a challenge, and he was thrown off. Like, his willpower, his confidence was shaken, and so it allowed the scabbards to be able to actually cut through him. His exterior defenses were down. This leads a lot of people thinking that it's like a sort of advanced Conqueror's Haki, because it has a lot to do with their force of presence, and it's just something that your body has on it as long as you have your mental facilities, kind of like Observation Haki, where as soon as Katakuri was thrown off his game, it wasn't working right. So similar to Conqueror's Haki, if you don't have that force of presence and confidence of a conqueror, then those defenses whittle along with it. And so with Big Mom, the only times that we ever saw her bleed was when she scraped her knee, a very simple injury, when Mother Caramel's photo was being threatened. Again, something that emotionally affected her, a traumatic event that threw her off her powerful throne of presence again, you know? It shook them, for lack of a better word. It threw them off their game, and so those defenses, that exterior hardening was gone, and they were able to be affected. And now we see Big Mom is affected by Law's ability, and Law's ability is called Shock Will. I'm just saying, that sounds a lot like his ability is actually focusing on her willpower itself, her force of presence, maybe even her soul. Nothing happened emotionally to Big Mom to throw her off her game. It was only Law's attack that focuses on the will of someone that allowed her to bleed. She was bleeding from her mouth and very, very damaged after that attack. And it also kind of adds to the dynamic between Law and Kid, where Law set Big Mom up to be damaged by Kid. Because if Law had an ability to shake someone's very essence, and so it made Big Mom vulnerable like any other person, that would make a lot of sense as to why Kid then did a bludgeoning attack. Because, well, let's face it, Kid, a bludgeoning attack, every steel beam in the world could crumble onto Big Mom, and a normal Big Mom would not be affected by that. However, if Big Mom was weakened and that exterior hardening, her willpower was pushed out of her or damaged in any way, that would make a lot of sense that Kid's ability could really do damage on her, because while we could say that Kid's ability might just be to hold her down, because even if it's not physically hurting her, every steel beam being attracted to you as a magnet kind of makes it hard to move and continue on, so this might just be a way to hold Big Mom off temporarily. But I'd like to say that Kid's awakening is going to do damage, and in order for that to happen, Law's ability 100% affected her force of presence, her essence, her soul, something. Because I'm kind of going crazy right now, because then we go to the third and final layer of this analysis, and it's what is happening to Big Mom exactly. Because we see when she is attacked, she's riding Prometheus, she has Napoleon, and Hera is right next to her. When Law attacks her, we have the depiction of some force expanding outwards. We see her body being thrown into like a T-pose in midair, suspended in midair, and her homies are warping around her. That, I feel like that is a very important piece of what exactly is happening to her, because if, like I just said, the homies weren't affected, that might be because her soul is being kind of not pushed out of her body, but being just stretched and damaged in that way that even the homies, who are her soul in itself, are being pushed away from her. And I would say that that was just the shock wave attack when it happened, but we see in several other panels leading up to when she's finally crushed by the steel beams, the homies are still being pushed out around her and warping around her. That just leads me more to thinking that this is a soul-focused attack, because everything around her, she is being kind of thrown out, and her homies, her soul, is being warped and pushed away from her. It's almost causing some field around her. Is that her willpower being pushed away? Is that the force of her presence being extracted from her enough to be damaged? Or is that her soul being damaged so much that even her homies, who are made of her soul, are being pushed away and warped around her too? All from Law's attack, which has will in it. That's all I'm saying. If his attacks actually affect the soul, I think it would also go in line really well with his devil fruit ability of being a doctor. Since soul is clearly a thing in the One Piece world, something tangible, Law having the ultimate devil fruit for a doctor, if he can also heal the soul, it's like the immortality surgery. Because he can heal the soul, but he can also hurt the soul. Just like he uses his abilities, he can heal people, the physical body, but he can also hurt it. So he can hurt the soul as well as heal it. And that makes a lot of sense that his awakening is injuring someone's very soul, even temporarily. And then the ultimate technique is to heal someone's soul, to give it longer life. That's pretty cool. Again, it makes me so happy to be a Law stan. Law has just impressed me to no bounds here in this chapter as he sets up the attack and we see what his awakening is. And if it's what I'm saying, that is pretty intense, and I really hope that's what it is. Maybe we'll get more information next chapter. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. I hope that this continues so we can see what effect this has permanently on Big Mom, and if she's gonna get back up after this. Maybe Kid's ability doesn't last very long. Maybe it's just a few moments of making someone else a magnet because it's so draining. Maybe she'll be able to get back up. Who knows? Maybe, I don't know. I just know that to see Law and Kid have an awakening was pretty surprising on my part, but these are the top tier supernova and the top tier fighters of this raid, and that leads me on to talking about Luffy. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I want to pose the question to you all. I want you guys to comment below what your interpretation of Luffy's awakening is going to be, because it could be something as simple as turning other people into rubber, but I don't think that that would really have an advantage in a fight, because it's because Luffy's rubber that he has this resistance to attack, so giving that to other people doesn't seem like a very smart idea. Another idea was that he can make the world around him rubber, that maybe rubber world is something, so that if the opponent isn't rubber, he might have an advantage, kind of similar to when he used Bellamy's attack where he was sprinting all over. If he was able to throw his opponent everywhere and throw them off their balance, get them moving at top speed so that he can completely control the fight and his opponent couldn't control their movements, that could be pretty interesting. I want to know what your thoughts are about Luffy's awakening, but overall, making this video has definitely given me an appreciation for awakenings in general, seeing Law and Kids, also talking about Whitebeards. Let me know your thoughts about Whitebeard's Awakening too. But yeah, this was just an amazing chapter, and so I had to highlight awakenings in this, of course, and dissect what the hell Law is doing. So with that, that wraps up our discussion. Again, make sure you subscribe if you enjoyed this video and leave a like and comment below your thoughts about everything. Share the video everywhere. Happy Halloween to everyone, and stay tuned on Twitter if you're interested in what my Halloween costume will be. This is the sneak peek, so make sure you check me out on Twitter to see what my costume is later today. And then of course, I also stream on Twitch, so feel free to go follow me over there. We can chat live and talk about One Piece and play games, and also the chapter reactions every Friday at 7 a.m. And also stay tuned for Zoro's video tomorrow. We'll have a long Zoro appreciation video of everything he's accomplished in the series up to this point, and we'll be featuring my friend Kate there, so check that out too. And let me know your thoughts. But until then, have a great day, happy Halloween, and check me next time. Bye!